Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and I couldn't be more excited to introduce to you today a guest panel of three incredible MKUltra, SRA, and human trafficking survivors and warriors who are all used and recognized within their networks for having spiritual gifts. On today's episode, we will be honing in on one of these spiritual gifts in particular that has interested many of you and me, and this is the phenomenon of psychic abilities. Joining us today to discuss this topic is Rachel Vaughan, Max Lowen, and Doug McIntyre. The interest to create this panel began when Rachel mentioned something in her episode testimonial on the imagination that sparked a lot of attention within the community, and that was central heterochromia. This topic alone opened up so many eyes and ears and potentially helping to answer a question that many survivors and chosen ones ask, which is, why me? And I believe these three amazing warriors are on the cutting edge of researching how to best answer this question, which not only can help survivors take their own power back, quite literally, but can also serve to help society as a whole in understanding the miraculous capabilities of the human body, mind, and spirit that are all but stripped from modern day education systems. Psychic abilities often get written off as being fake, fiction, a conspiracy, or even new age, thanks in part to the people who exploit this gift and use it for personal gain in society at those sketchy little psychic shops, as well as within mainstream media, which has largely positioned special gifts to only exist in fiction movies and Marvel characters. But what you're going to see today is that the truth is indeed stranger and more amazing than fiction. Humans literally have inherent capabilities that are superhuman in nature and supernatural. And these child abuse systems know this and seek it out in children. The problem is that these gifts end up being exploited and used to push evil agendas in these systems instead of teaching these children how to cultivate and use these gifts for the purposes God intended. What I've come to find is that these abilities are more common than anybody knows, and by educating the public, we begin to take the power away from the enemy by shining a bright light on the darkness. These amazing warriors on the show today will be covering a plethora of subjects, including a deeper dive into central heterochromia, psychic abilities and how they relate to MKUltra and SRA, scouting processes, how SRA and MK survivors who heal retain some of these incredible abilities, the path survivors take as starseeds, as well as answering some of the questions you in the audience submitted. If you guys want to watch Rachel, Max, or Doug's testimonies, you can go in the show notes. I have done individual testimonial episodes with all of them that I highly recommend you guys watch, and I will have those linked in the show notes for you. Today's episode is going to be jam-packed, and I ask all of you to please put away what you are doing and give these three incredible guests your full attention. I'd also recommend grabbing a pen and paper, as this is going to be an amazing episode chock full of information. Before I finish introducing today's guest panel, I just want to give a very quick reminder that if you're a survivor or whistleblower who wants to share your story on the podcast, or who wants to share any information privately with me, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. I'm also on Substack, and I'd love your support there, where I'm taking up journaling as an outlet for me to reflect on the podcast, guests, and my advocacy work. And you can subscribe to me there at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. All of my own social media links are linked in the show notes, as well as all of these three amazing guests. And I thank you all with my whole heart for all the love, the support, and the safety you provide to this platform and to every single guest. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming our guest panel of honor, voices for the voiceless, truth warriors, overcomers, independent researchers, brilliant minds, and unbroken spirits, the one, the only, Rachel Vaughan, Max Lowen, and Doug McIntyre. Thank you guys so much for being here with me today.
Good to be here.
Thank you. That's quite an introduction. Thank you, Emma.
Yes.
You're welcome. You guys are absolutely incredible. And it's always really cool to get a group together. You know, it's so validating. I think one testimony is validating enough, but when you get three complete strangers who didn't know each other that have similar experiences, and other people listening can also chime in and validate, it's really empowering what that can do for the community. And obviously all three of you have so much insight. You guys are constantly researching. You guys have collaborated on so many projects yourselves. So it's an honor to have you here. What I thought we would do to start, and like I said, for people listening, all three guests have done individual episodes with me, and they've done many other episodes on other podcasts as well. You can go to Rachel's or Max's channel and see all of the above on both their channels. So again, I'll have them go over their links, and I'll have those in the show notes for you guys. And I encourage you guys to go look into more of the podcasts that they do and that they have. And on this podcast, they've also done testimonials, and I'll have those in the show notes too for a quick reference. And then under the show notes of all their individual episodes are also where you can find them. So I thought, since you guys have already been here and done your full testimony, I thought what we could do is go around and you guys could share, since the topic today is psychic abilities, you guys could maybe share how this was a part of your life as a child, maybe how you were chosen for it, and give a little bit of insight on your own personal experiences and how psychic abilities was a part of your own upbringing. And why don't we start with Rachel?
Okay, well, thanks again, Emma, for having us on, darling. As we discussed in our previous interview, I believe my father chose my mother because she had central heterochromia and she had psychic ability in her side of the family. And her father had been part of a military, had military sort of background. So that's also part of the selection process. They look for, with the psychic programming, the theta psychic programming under MK Ultra, they look for people who have intergenerational abuse at least 3 levels or 3 generations. So if you're the 3rd generation of that, then you're prime. If you've got central heterochromia, you're prime. If there's anybody in the family who has Rh negative blood, that's also, you know, part of that satanic bloodline that seems to have some sort of influence on psychic ability as well, or those families seem to have a lot of psychic ability in them. So yeah, I believe my father chose my mother to breed with because my 3 siblings who I don't have the same mother with also have, or 2 of those have the same central heterochromia. So I think my father chose both his wives to produce children with. I do have another sibling but I don't have access or contact with him at the moment, so I can't work out whether or not he's got the same thing. And Carl, if you're watching, get in touch. So I was used from very early age, from infancy. It started with memories of being shown Xena cards. I had to look up what a Xena card was because I wasn't sure what these things were. They were about a foot. Well, I was very small at the time. I was still small enough to have a dummy in my mouth, a nappy on, and be held up by my father for the testing. But these cards seemed very large. They're about a foot tall. They seemed quite huge. They were white with black markings on them. And at that time, I was asked, even though I wasn't verbal enough to speak at the time, I was asked to work out what somebody in another room was seeing on one of these cards and then to point out which card they were seeing. So that was a form of, I guess, psychic spying on what was going on in somebody else's mind, or I guess it was a form of psychic driving, but most psychic driving is this constant music refrains that they play over and over with people. I would take that as being, you know, projection, perhaps some sort of psychic projection that person was doing into my mind, or I was just picking up on it. I've also been used, I mean, there's so many things they use me for, but to read auras, to work out whether or not a person was a good person or a bad person, someone that could be trusted within the cult or not trusted, which sounds ridiculous when you're talking about a satanic cult, but they know that there are people within their group that they can't trust. So if they're completely and utterly psychopathic, then they can't trust them to do certain things or to be in any kind of allegiance with them. So most of the people that they want to use in the cults are the ones that are good people that have been co-opted into doing bad things. and under some sort of control and blackmail, I suppose. I was also used as a remote viewer. So there was lots of different things that they used me for. I used to have prophetic dreams. I used to be able to see the future. I still see the future as well, but I don't have to wait for it to come up in a dream. So, I mean, there's so many different things that could go on forever, and I don't want to take up everybody's time, but that's just, yeah, some of the stuff that I was used for.
Thank you so much for answering that. And then let's go to Doug next.
Yeah, I'm still recovering a lot of my memories, so I don't have a lot of memories at this stage of them experimenting on me when through the MK Ultra or the cult things. But I definitely have the ability. So by the age of 5, you know, I was fully dissociative. I could go out of body. I can turn pain off so I don't feel pain. Yeah, I can go to the psychic realms, do all sorts of things. So for me, it was a self-protection mechanism, which is what is natural to humans. So when we go through extreme trauma, and our body's no longer safe, we have to go out of the body to feel safe. So as little kids going through extreme trauma, if you can't be safe in your body because you're being abused or traumatized or all the things they do to us, then we go out of body. So originally I would go into psychic realms as a little kid, which they did use, but I don't have a lot of recollection of it. But I was very good at communicating with spirits. They would come through the walls and I would talk to them and things like that. Like Rachel, I had precognition. I could see the future. I could know things that were going to happen hours, days, weeks, sometimes months before they happened. So I had a very strong connection psychically. Then they put me on LSD as a little kid, and then that made that too scary to go out of body anymore because all of a sudden I'm hurtling through galaxies and not knowing what's going on. So then I had to go into my imagination to try and find somewhere safe. So it's this journey of the soul to survive because we have such strong survival instincts. You know, how do we survive when our body's not safe? You know, how do we survive when the spiritual realms aren't safe and things like that? So it's this, you know, survival mechanism to get through whatever we go through. And the fact that we have these mechanisms has helped us to survive. Sometimes I wonder whether that was a good thing because, you know, just sort of getting up and keep going and keep going, keep going is very torturous at times. But yeah, it's an amazing life, an amazing childhood. It's not necessarily the easy one, but yeah, we experience things that are quite profound. And, you know, I find it easy to connect to spirits, nature spirits, to God, to source, to all those sorts of things. That's more the world that I live in rather than the physical world. And I have to do things to remind myself I have a body because so often I turn it off. And so often I'll cut myself and I won't realize it. And I wonder where all the red texture is. And then I realize I've got blood on me and so on and so on. Yeah. So that happens quite a bit. Recently, I almost cut my finger off. You can see it's, you know, things just heal up almost without scars. So I've got scars all over me, but they heal up so you can't see them. So we have different things that happen to our bodies. But psychically, yeah, the psychic realms for me are very easy because that's my natural state of being. The issue for me is being in the body. Yeah, so I hope that sort of helps.
Yeah. Do you have, I can't tell with your glasses, do you have central heterochromia as well, Doug?
Yeah, I do. I have in the middle, it's like a hazel color, and on the outside, it's green. Sometimes it goes bluish. But I didn't realize a lot of times because my mother's poisoned me all my life. She's got access to my house, and the poisoning caused my eyes to go a darker color. So when I realized what was happening and I stopped the poisoning, then all of a sudden my eyes started going into the two colors. And that's how I started researching the heterochromia because I would look in the mirror and go, well, my eyes aren't brown anymore. They're, you know, they're hazel with green or blue. And sometimes it'd be a blue ring, then green, and the hazel. So yeah, so that was what triggered me on the heterochromia journey, was thinking, you know, my eyes are a different color. My father's eyes are green. Two brothers, their eyes are blue, and I've got a sister whose eyes are brown. So yeah, we have every color in my family.
Wow. Thank you so much for answering that. And Max?
So I'll start where Rachel started. My mother's family line, they're all Rh negative blood. I know there's at least 2 generations that go back. I'm not sure about further than that. When I was a child, I was definitely psychic, telepathic. I could, like Doug just said, I could be injured and heal my body very, very quickly. I think one of the things I was trained in is to have an audiographic and photographic memory. And I've retained that today because of the things that I went through even when I got out and I was in my 20s and 30s. I was always so scared when I was interacting with other people, even though I'm very social and charismatic, there was a part of me that was super scared. So I would sort of dissociate. So this memory thing came in handy because I would record the conversation. And then later, when I was more calm, I could replay it in my head. So that's actually helped me a lot in life. Sometimes I've annoyed people because kind of in a lawyeristic way, I'm like, no, you said da 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 da, you know. So there was that ability. I was telepathic with animals and trees as a small child. And so I was studied a lot in my uncle's facility for these different abilities. And the psychic ability, the way I would describe it, it's like when I see people, they're like a billboard. So it's like they have flashing colors or life experiences or their soul, where, you know, the kind of soul they have. So there's a lot in a person that I actually believe we're all psychic as humans. It's a natural ability that we have, but it's been dumbed down in this reality here. It's been severed, but I think eventually as we go more towards the light that all of us will probably regain it. And I would even say a lot of people are psychic, but they don't know it. They don't realize what that means. It's very subtle. Sometimes you just know a thing about a person. You just feel something. So I feel things primarily. So I just sort of pick things up. There was once a mom when my daughter was small, another mom, and she was talking to me. And I kept staring right here between her eyes, and I felt like there was something there. And then I found out a few days later that she had a tumor there and she was, you know, having surgery. It's not like I was trying to, but so again, I do think all of us, there's maybe a continuum and we have this ability. But that's how it manifests for me, just kind of knowing things and picking up things. And, you know, with among the different tortures when I was a child, there was a time I remember I was about 4, I think, and I was put in this box. It was like a metal box and it had no seams, no cracks. So it's kind of designed to make you go crazy because you can't tell if it's night, day, you know, up, down, whatever. And I don't know how long I was in there, but I have a sense it was a long time. And what I would do in those situations is I would be somewhere else, kind of like what Doug was saying. I was actually in this beautiful nature spot with a waterfall, and I was swimming in there with the dolphins and an elephant there and a lion. And so I had this thing where during different tortures, I would go somewhere else and be there. And then the last thing I'll say is I was killed various times, but when I would die, I would leave my body. I would always be there with Jesus. That was my friend who was always with me. And I would see, he would show me a holographic reality, and there's different timelines and different possibilities of the same thing. And it really makes a difference whether one of us is there or not. So I would see, he would always say, you can choose to go back or not, because it was such a difficult life. You know, I always had that choice. And based on what I would always choose to come back. So I had this ability to die in whatever form and then come back into my body. So of course they studied that too. So that's kind of a little sum of some of the abilities that I came in with.
you for sharing. It's so insightful and, like I said, really validating to hear three people that have totally different families, totally different places where they grew up, and there's so many similarities in what you guys have been through. I want to expand on this question and sort of go into why is this important to these systems that they find people that have these gifts? You guys mentioned a few ways that they tested you or things that they were looking for in somebody that had this, maybe some telltale signs. But on a grand scale, what are some of the ways that these systems are taking these gifts and using them to their advantage for, say, agendas, and what agendas, and why is it important that they have this ability and to begin with? And let's start, Doug, you want to start this one?
Yeah, well, my understanding from my past is it's all about mind control and mind controlling the masses. So part of what I was involved in as a little kid was MK Ultra came to Sydney, Australia in 1960, and it went to Sydney University, and it was attached to the hospital I was born at that stage. And I vividly remember them doing experiments on me to do with colour TV, because we only had black and white TV at that stage. And one of the guys who was one of the leading experts in the world on hypnosis went to Sydney Uni, and he was involved in that. And it was a constant experimentation, to develop the Manchurian candidate, someone who at the front is very calm and collected, but has a killer side at the back and can be used as a pawn to do their evil, because they're cowards, the people in the cults, total utter cowards. So rather than putting themselves in danger, they would rather use little kids or other people, program people to do their dirty work, so then, they don't have to worry about any consequence. So, they live their lives full of fear and cowardice, I think. And so for years I would have these, it was like a checkerboard of different colors that would change color in front of me every night I go to bed, and that would be left in my head from the programming of the days. And that went on for years and years and years. And from what I understood now, going back, getting some of the papers and things like that, the whole basis of everything is mind control. And what they're trying to do with modern media, I think I read somewhere the other day that the average person via the modern media has seen 16,000 deaths. So yeah, it's that many. So what they're trying to do is to traumatize us, because our body, when it's watching a movie, doesn't know what's real or what's not. I find it's very helpful to tell myself what I'm watching is not real, because what they're trying to do is trigger people to see, when they see death or rape or violence or things like that, to get them to do the recoil or the freeze, and then they can start implanting things as well. So for me, it's just about controlling the masses. And also, as was mentioned before, they want to dumb the masses down to make the average population as stupid as possible, feed them all the lies while they keep the truth. So again, it's just a control thing and a fear thing. But that's how I understand it all. It's always been about control and them being in control.
Great answer, Doug. Max, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, your question was why do they do this? So we have to keep in mind that this is done to the children of these elite bloodline families. It's us, but it's also, anyone you see on the world stage has been put through these things, so that the child is broken down, and then the different alters that happen from the excess trauma are programmed, so that these people are groomed and prepared to take the highest positions of power in the world. So somebody has to run the global cult. So they prepare that generation from childhood by perpetrating this torture and this abuse and splitting them off, and then programming them to do whatever it is they're groomed to do or become, right? So my family was in politics, generals and ambassadors and all that kind of stuff. So I suspect I was being prepared for some role on the stage myself. But that's what they do. I remember my friend Kathy O'Brien, she told a story about one of these hunting parties that we've all experienced, where they, you know, they bring the kids in and then you run and hide, and then the perpetrators come and find you and rape you and all that. But she described that George Bush Jr. was one of the kids at that party, at that hunting party where she was, and he was being hunted too, right? So this is what I'm saying. They do this to prepare their global leaders so they have full control of them, right? So, you know, and you can break down a child and make them anything. You can make them an assassin. You can make them, you know, a lot of us have been used as honeypots to seduce. You can do, you know, you can use my audiographic, photographic memory for spying. You know, when I was a kid, when people said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would say a spy. I think I was actually, you know, maybe being prepared for that. You can groom kids to really do anything. That's, if you think about it, I've used this example, like even in China and Russia, you know, when they would select kids very young and train them to be Olympic athletes, you know, it's not much more of a step beyond that. The human being has incredible potential. We're not living up to our potential in this reality on purpose. They're not allowing it, but they know this. And if they take you and they train you and they, you know, and they put you through all this stuff, you become superhuman. So I always say, like, my training gave me a black belt. I have an endurance that's not natural, a self-healing ability, whatever, all the gifts that I have, they were born through torture, but you can be developed into anything. They know this and they do this. And so I would say, why do they do it? To create the future global cult leaders and fully control them. Now, with some of us, that didn't work. We broke out of that. But with many, it has worked.
Great answer. Thank you so much for the insight, Max. And Rachel?
Yeah, well, just to add on to what Max and Doug have already said, which is just brilliant. They also use psychics, children and adults, to spy on one another. So if you look at the Freemasons' oath, they have these oaths that if you do this or you do that, or you speak out of turn, you tell about the truth of their secrets in public, they can then be executed in all manner of ways. And they go into great detail about how they're going to do it, to try and terrify one another into not speaking about these things. So they would use me as a child to spy on whether or not they were speaking out of turn. They do that a lot. So that's that remote viewing. It's part of remote viewing, is to spy on whether or not these people are doing what they're supposed to do. So that's another factor. It's control. So it's control of the masses, and it's control in many different ways. There's also the fact that, you know, they don't drink the fluoridated water. They don't dumb themselves down. So we've got fluoride in the water for a reason. Many people don't realize this. I'm sure people on your channel would be aware of it. But fluoride calcifies the pineal gland. Now, the pineal gland is the seat of where our antenna, which is our soul is our antenna, and we get to a certain frequency and we can pick up information from the Akashic record, which is past, present, future, all events, actions, thoughts, everything that's happened, will happen, and has happened, or is happening. So when you calcify the pineal gland, that information cannot come through into the mind and be perceived. So that's why we get fluoridated water. That's why we have so many pesticides in food. It's not just to make us sick, it's also to make us stupid. And of course, these elites don't do that. And the minions, the people that they want to control, don't do that either. I grew up drinking, you know, sure, we drank tap water, but we always had a rainwater tank because my mother wouldn't touch tap water because she couldn't stand the taste of it. So, you know, in the 70s and 80s, that was reasonably unusual in Adelaide. Adelaide's always been known for the terrible quality of the water. It is so disgusting. People, you know, come from other countries and drink our water and they say, oh my God, this is vile. It is really bad. So it tastes of metals, it tastes of chlorine, you know, it's pretty foul. So, you know, that it's control and it's spying on many different levels. Yeah.
Thank you all so much. Does anybody have anything else that you want to add after listening?
I just want to comment on what Rachel said. So the pineal gland, it's also called the third eye or the inner eye. And I did my master's in neuropsychology. that pineal gland, even though it's buried deep inside the brain, it has photoreceptive cells and rods and cones, just like our actual eyes. So I mean, I think that's just sort of to confirm what Rachel said.
Yeah, it actually has crystals in it, little quartz crystals. So if you look at any computer, any phone has a quartz crystal in there. So it helps to pick up information. So we are like supercomputers that pick up information from the ether, from frequencies, electromagnetic frequencies that, you know, are probably well outside of, you know, what the computer and a phone can pick up on.
Wow. I mean, it's really sad how repressed this education is from us. I think people would marvel and love themselves so much if they just knew who they were. We're told that we're just these, you know, little ants that need to work 40 hours a week for somebody, and you know, they make everything so expensive, and you know, the mind control obviously always putting us in fear. It's so sad, you know, all these people that are so depressed, and it's like, gosh, if you just realized what you actually are in your body. And that's why I love these conversations, because it brings us back to that. It brings us back to who we are and remembering that and re-educating ourselves and reminding us that we're freaking amazing, you know, no matter where we are on the scale. And I wanted to ask, you guys don't all have to answer this. If one of you has an answer, or maybe all of you, uh, when Max was talking earlier, and even all of you, it reminded me of a word that a lot of people use, I think, for a very maybe mild version of psychic abilities, which is intuition. And I wanted to see what you guys, what's the difference between intuition or psychic abilities, or is it sort of a psychic ability just on maybe a very small scale, internalized, where somebody might realize something about themselves, or, you know, have a hunch about something? I wanted to get feedback if anybody had an answer to that.
I would say intuition is that gut feeling, something you feel intently or intensely, but you don't know where it's coming from. Whereas there's many different psychic abilities. There's clairaudience, where you can actually hear voices of otherworldly entities. Clairsentience, where you can see, you know, you pick up on things around you that other people don't pick up on, which is probably what an empath would pick up on. Precognition, where you see the future. So there's many different areas of psychic ability.
I would say intuition is that I connect it to the heart, and I think it's the voice of our soul. See, the mind can be hacked, and it is in this reality. And there are patents out there, so I'm not making this up, very many of them, where they can manipulate our thoughts, they can insert thoughts, they can go into our dreams. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. So you can't even trust, and you know, if all of us in this human form, in this reality, I'm sure I speak for everyone, there's a constant stream of thoughts, you know, some negative, some not. And sometimes, you know, if you really think about it, the thoughts kind of run us instead of us controlling or deciding what we think. So you can't trust, the mind is very useful, but but it's connected to this dimension and manipulated. So intuition is that guiding voice from your soul. And the mind is great, but it should be in service to the heart. And by the way, the gut has a different brain in it. It also has a brain. It's all connected with the vagus nerve. So I think intuition is, again, a natural thing that we all have. It's drowned out by all the noise. But if you cultivate it, that's what can guide you in your life. And, you know, so many people have said, I'm walking down a dark, I'm going to go down this one street or alley, and this voice in me says, don't. Well, that's your intuition. That's that part of you protecting you. There's a million examples of that. And when everyone says, when they don't listen to that voice and they go ahead and do what they thought, something happens, right? And then they wish they had listened. So I think it's a natural, it's like that voice of our soul speaking to us all the time. And I think that should be the thing that we value the most. But of course, we're taught in society that that's silly to devalue it, precisely because it's so important.
Great answer.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add, Doug?
Yeah, I was going to say intuition is like a knowingness. So it's, for me, when I get intuition as opposed to other things happening, it's like, as Max said, it's like a compulsion to do something, you know, that may be out of the normal. It's like, oh, yeah, don't drive down here, or don't walk here, or go and talk to this person, or things like that. But there can be lots of different levels. So how I understand it is I have a higher self. I don't bring all my soul into this incarnation. I just bring, 60 to 80% or something like that, and the rest of my soul's still up in the soul space. So I can learn to communicate with the rest of my soul, my higher self. I can learn to communicate with my God. I can learn to communicate with my guides as well. I can learn to communicate with different spiritual forces here, with telekinesis, with other people, all sorts of different things. So as you become more used to it, you start to see different energy lines with different levels of communication. So the intuition for me can be self, but can also be someone in my network, my energetic network, if I can put it that way, who knows something's coming and they're trying to warn me to get out of the way, or it may not be part of my life contract. I might be heading down a certain direction and it's not in alignment with what I've contracted to come here to do, and it may stuff up what I'm meant to do. So I'm sort of reminded, and I think all of us have had this, where sometimes we ignore it, but it gets stronger and stronger and stronger till it knocks us across the head sometime, to make sure we get back on path, or we avoid something that's not good for us, or might circumvent something that we're meant to do here. But it's something that's fun to explore with. And a lot of people, I think, journaling, you can write down what your intuition is for the day and then see how the day unfolds. And it's a way that you can learn. My guides have always kept me on a very short leash. So from the moment I'd wake up in the morning, it'd be like, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it was like that all my life. And sometimes I'd get creepy with them because I'd say, just let me live my life, But I had to learn to develop that intuition. That was part of what I was learning. So it's it's something very worthwhile, I think, for people to listen to.
Thank you so much. Those were awesome answers. And I want to touch on with all of you, Rachel had mentioned there's different types of psychic abilities. And then also I'm hearing from all of you that there's different ways maybe to experience these too, whether it's getting a visual or having a feeling. And I wanted you all to go around and maybe if you could educate us on what types of psychic abilities you guys have, what those are, and then how do you experience that? Is that a visual that you get? Is it a feeling? How does that manifest in your field, in a sense, for you guys to be able to do this? And let's start with Rachel.
Okay, so I'm just going through in my head. So there's precognition, where I can see the future, and I do that a lot with clients. A lot of people want to know what's coming so that they can be prepared, or to allay any fears. There's telekinesis, so I can often pick up what people are thinking. For example, this is a form of it. I'll know when the phone rings who's on the other end of the line, often, not all the time, but often. I can also, I think I have some sort of influence too, because if I want someone to contact me, I can make that happen, usually within a day, sometimes within a few hours, but usually within a day. There's also remote viewing, so I can see things from a distance. I've recently been experimenting with moving things with the mind as well, so I can turn a flywheel. I do an experiment, or I show a video of me doing an experiment with telekinesis, which is very simple. You can see anybody on YouTube doing this. If you look up telekinesis experiment on YouTube, you'll see people doing it. It's just turning a small disc of paper or alfoil on a pin, and you can actually see where the aura interacts. If you can read auras and see auric energy, you can see where the aura interacts with the disc. So there's that as well. Yeah, I think I'm sure there's many other things that I can't think of. Aura reading, obviously. There's things that I was taught to do as a child that were not very nice, because that was sort of because it basically, when you're doing the psychic theatre training, it's assassin training. So I don't want to go too much into that, but there's that as well. So we are incredibly powerful, and there are quite a few. I mean, look at Aleister Crowley. I was only talking about this recently in an interview. He was known for, one particular incident is talked about where he was walking behind a gentleman with a friend of his and tripped the person up that was in front of them with his mind. So you can interfere with people energetically with your aura. And that's something that, a lot of people have a great deal of fear around. If you look into, religions, they say you shouldn't look into these things. And, people who do that sort of thing, obviously not kind-hearted, because you don't go around doing that sort of thing if you have those abilities. but people do have these abilities. And this is something that people need to know, because I think a lot of us go around, or not me personally, but a lot of people go around thinking that they are not supposed to develop these abilities because, number one, they'll get an attachment of some sort. They'll invite something dark in, or they'll get turned dark because they'll get too much power. There's lots of, fears around these things. But the problem with that is if we all shy away from it, the Satanists, the dark people, will be playing with these things and have all these abilities, and none of us will. All the light workers will just be cowering in the corner saying, well, we can't look into that because it's too scary, too dangerous. We've got to be warriors on both sides. There's going to be dark people who are going to manipulate these things. Humans have incredible abilities. We all have to be armed and protected.
Max?
I'd say for me, it mostly manifests as just a knowing. All of a sudden, I just know something. And I've learned to trust that. It's different than when you think something. It's just boom, it's there and you know it. I have seen moments in the future, and I've called them visions. So that's a visual. It's a flash of something, it's a scene. For example, I maybe 6 months or so before I got pregnant with my daughter, I had a vision of myself standing on a mountaintop, holding a baby and full of joy. And, a few months later, I was pregnant. I was not trying to, it was with birth control at age 38. So, the odds are not really high there. But the vision told me that was coming. I wasn't on that wavelength, so I decided to interpret the vision as a psychologist that I am. I was like, oh, it's probably me holding my inner child. Well, no, it was actually, and that's how my visions are. They're very literal. So, so with precognition, I get visions, and I get, when people are talking to me, like I said, they're a billboard, even now. So a person can be using words, but I'm picking up, and I pick it up I'm a Cancer sun and a Cancer moon. I pick it up in my body. I feel it. So I can feel them, what they really mean. So often, so it's very difficult to lie to me because words can be deceptive, but I just feel the energy. It's so clear, And again, I think we can all do this once you kind of clean out some of the stuff that's in the way. We have this natural ability. Think of animals, think of dogs. They know when someone's a good person, they know when someone isn't, right? So, I mean, duh, we have that ability. It's just, again, it's been something that, like Rachel said, it's been linked to the dark or, bad stuff, but, that's a trick. We all have that, absolutely. So that would be a few of the ways that I would say that I'm psychic. I also actively manifest. So if I have an idea of what I want, I visualize it, I feel it, I feel the emotion of it, like the joy of the thing I'm trying to manifest. I put myself there. So you might say it's in the future, but it's like I create that version of me that I want, where I want, with what I want surrounding it. And then I revisit that, and I'm actually in that place. And then I think it sort of draws the present me and that me together, and then boom. So I've had experience doing that and then literally manifesting what I have worked on. Yeah. Which again, I think we can all do.
That is so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing, Max. Doug, do you have anything to add on your end?
Yeah, I was going to talk about thoughts. I have an interesting relationship with thoughts, and I've done a lot of psychedelics, and that's really helped me in relation to thoughts. And so I don't identify my thoughts as part of me. And so what I went through when I did my first ayahuasca session was I would watch two entities downloading all the thoughts into my head. And so they were teaching me that the thoughts don't come from me, but what their role to do was to download all the thoughts into me, and how I responded to those thoughts showed where I was on my life path, on my contractual path. And so once I realized that the thoughts weren't me, I could understand that some of the things I was getting upset about, I didn't need to, because they were just there and I didn't identify with them. And so I've learned to just let thoughts flow through me like a waterfall. And sorry about that. And that's been a really, really good process. And what I've done with the different entities, because I can see the entities, but I can't describe to you what they look like because they're in another dimension that's higher than these dimensions. So I can sit there now and look at them and just see them doing their work, but I can't tell you what they look like because it's just, I don't have the ability to describe it because it just doesn't fit in our concepts of sight and things like that. But what I've learned to do with the entities is work on the thoughts and things like that. And now I understand the whole process of thoughts and that they flow through us. And that's what inspiration is. I think a lot of people from Einstein to Da Vinci to all different people throughout history talk about, you know, thoughts coming into their heads and being inspired. They say normally when an invention comes to pass, at least 3 people around the world had the same thought at the same time. So I look at thoughts as a way that the universe directs humanity in the direction that it wants it to go. And, you know, the fact that we're, you know, speeding up in terms of our evolution with technology and things like that, to me is something that's just a conscious driven thing that, you know, God is directing. And meanwhile, we've got, you know, other people trying to step in and direct it themselves. But it's, you know, I think as we, you know, realize our thoughts on ourselves, and I had a thing on a boga where I did a flood there, and all the thoughts in my head were purged out of my head. So after 8 hours, I had no thoughts left and nothing to think. So there are all these, you know, different experiences you can where you can start to test things with yourself and understand and start to observe your thoughts rather than just engaging with them. And I found that really, really helpful. I sit there and go, okay, this thought's coming into my head. Okay, do I feel like that thought's part of me? How do I react to it? How do I respond to it? And it starts to teach me not just about me, but also about what's coming through. So there's lots of ways that we can, I think once we step outside of ourselves, and look, as survivors, it's easier for us because we're dissociative. So I can do the co-consciousness thing where I can be feeling the thought, but watching myself feeling the thought at the same time and also taking notes. So it's that level of, I think, understanding ourselves as we move through life gives us a lot more information. Yeah.
Oh, do either of you ladies have anything else to add after listening?
Can I just add to what Max was saying too about visions? So everything that I get when I do remote viewing and all of the work that I do is visual. I'll get these visions. I don't work with clairaudience. I was used as a child in rituals to communicate with demonic entities because the cowardly adults around me didn't want to have to do it. Hearing that, I switched that off. I have a concern for people who do hear voices simply because my experiences with that was very negative. But I also know that with schizophrenia, and Max might be able to speak about this as well, there's a gentleman called Jerry Marzinski who's done a lot of studies on this, that schizophrenics are actually hearing demonic entities that are trying to drive them to kill themselves or kill other people or harm themselves or harm others. These are voices that are discarnate that these poor people are hearing. And they just get medicated to the point of being a zombie, so they can't hear the voices anymore. What they need is some sort of exorcism or assistance to clear that out of their aura so that these things can't attack them anymore. So I just wanted to give a sort of a warning on listening to voices, or just being very careful. If you ever hear a voice and it's telling you to do terrible things, it's not your guides, it's something else.
Yeah, I worked with schizophrenics early on, right out of university at a psychiatric hospital. And it's exactly what Rachel said. I mean, the voices were tormenting to the people, whether they were men or women, and they would tell them to do certain harm to somebody else or to themselves, you know. And that was really the main feature, like a constant torment, right? So, and they would say, I remember this young woman, she was probably in her 20s, and she was very tiny and petite. And she kept telling me about that she was a murderess in some, you know, she had all this information about a specific location and all these bodies and everything, but clearly it wasn't her, right? So it was some other entity speaking through her. And in psychology, it's considered a chemical imbalance. And so they medicate. Now, I've seen these people heavily medicated, and the medication doesn't make them better. All it does is it zombifies them to the point that they're literally walking zombies. It's really horrific to watch, and they're locked up. And, you know, I think we have to find a whole new thing to help people with schizophrenia. And it isn't the meds, and it isn't locking them up. It's dealing with, we're going to have a mind shift, a mindset shift here, that this is demonic possession. And I say this a lot. I think the world is going to have to accept that demonic entities exist. The biggest lie that we've been told is that Satan doesn't exist, okay? This is real. I've seen demonic entities, you know, I've seen children sacrifice. I've seen these entities come in. And the elites that run the world, by the way, why are they such psychopaths? Why are they all pedophiles? Why are they so brutal that they can rape a newborn baby or eat the flesh of humans, or what, all the horrible things that they do? People say, I can't believe that. Well, that's because we're human and we have a soul. What I'm telling you is they look like a human body, but who's inhabiting that body is a demonic entity. And that demonic entity was, in a ritual, invited to come into that person and inhabit them. And my uncle, who ran the torture facility, I'm sure that he had a demonic entity running him, because, I mean, the cruelty and barbarism of these people isn't human, and it's because they're not human. So I think this is going to be very difficult for the world to sort of accept, because we've been raised to think this is all, you know, and they make Hollywood movies and they make it sort of in a way that you think, oh, that's not, you know, it's absolutely real. And I think I can speak for Rachel and Doug, for us having experienced and seen these demonic entities in rituals. I mean, this is unfortunately the reality.
Yeah, my father would switch. You could see it on his face. I've got a photograph of him when he was switching into that Evil Max altar where this other thing would take over. So you could see it on his face.
Oh my gosh, it's so horrifying. And yes, I totally agree. You know, we're especially, you know, all of us that didn't go through what you guys did and weren't exposed to that, we're taught academically that our world is just physical, that if you can't touch it and see it, that there's nothing there to look at. You know, even energy, you know, we know energy exists, and that's not even really studied a lot in, you know, different segments of society. Even science, you know, sort of diverts from that topic and talks about other things. So this is really important, you know, and again, having all of your validation and talking about these things, it makes it more normalized, and it brings people back to, again, like, what is this world that we live in? It is a spiritual, metaphysical, you know, world. We are metaphysical, super human, in a sense, beings, you know, and we're not taught these things. So this is really enlightening. And yeah, Jerry Marzinski, it is fascinating, that whole topic and how he brings up that point. You would think if somebody was hearing voices that weren't from a demon, that some of these voices might be happy. Like, why is every
Right.
single voice that people hear literally telling them to kill themselves or hurt other people or do bad things? You would think that there would be a different, that everybody would have a different type of voice. Maybe some are angry, some are super happy, some are joyful, you know, so we should ponder things more than what we're just told. And one thing that I wanted to bring up, that Max had talked about a little bit in an email, is the healing aspect, and like how resilient survivors are, and how some of these gifts, or all of them, can be retained through healing. I would love for all of you to go around, and I'll start with Max on this one. And maybe I've heard some survivors that have talked to me privately that say that they're scared to heal, not because they don't want to, but because some of these gifts that you grew up with can benefit you as an adult. And some people fear losing that if they try to go on a healing journey, you know, and I would love for you guys to maybe talk on that, about the difference between maybe how these abilities were as a child or growing up, and then how healing impacted positively or negatively your experience with having these gifts? And Max, we'll start with you on this one.
I would say you won't lose the gifts. You'll actually gain control of them, instead of the dark controlling them. And I always say healing is a revolutionary act because, as Doug said earlier, they use trauma to fragment us into different pieces, and then we're all mind controlled, right? And poisoned, as Rachel said. It's fluoride, it's pesticides, it's vaccines, it's pharmaceuticals, it's chemtrails, it's everything, right? So the point is, we are naturally, organically, extremely powerful, light-filled beings full of potential. And so a lot of effort has gone out from this global cult to render us and our consciousness very, very small. So healing is a revolutionary act, because if you do heal yourself, you're flipping them the bird. Because as you heal yourself, as you get rid of all the mental distorted thoughts that you have, the low self-confidence, the beliefs that are wrong, you need to heal your vessel. You need to heal your body, by good nutrition, by detoxing the body, because there's so much out there that we need to detox regularly. Taking supplements because the soil doesn't have the nutrients that we need anymore, deliberately. Exercising, sleeping enough, basic stuff. So consciousness is residing in this vessel, and if this vessel is polluted, the consciousness is not going to be where it could, right? Then I think we need to monitor our thinking, because again, there can be a lot of thoughts inserted, and if we're traumatized like we were, I certainly know I had a lot of negative thoughts that were self-defeating and keeping me down. And whenever I would speak out, it's programs, I would have thoughts that would then torment me later. Oh, you shouldn't have said that, you're so stupid, or, if I told about my abuse, it was thoughts of killing myself, etc. So I think it's like, we should have mental hygiene, like we shower and brush our teeth. We should constantly watch what we're thinking, not just because they're inserting thoughts in our head, but because of everyone's gone through some degree of trauma. So we need to make sure that we monitor our thoughts. And then if they're negative or disempowering, you can go stop, and you can say cancel, cancel, cancel. And then you can replace that with an empowering thought. And, sometimes people call that affirmations. I believe in gratitude. Every morning I wake up and I'm grateful for everything that I have, food, shelter, the sun's out today, my dog is so cute, whatever it is. I have loving friends, Rachel and Doug are some of my best friends. I'm grateful every day. That raises our frequency, and it reminds us, it puts the mental thing into a positive gear, right? And if you do gratefuls right when you wake up, you prime your brain to recognize good things throughout the day, right? And then that's how you shift your reality. So you got to take care of the body and then the mind. And then we have emotions because this facilitates us keeping ourselves going and balanced. So I always, if I have an emotion, like if I'm really, really, I don't know, angry, then I don't throw that on another human. I've learned not to do that, but I allow that anger to come out. So if you have emotions, sometimes you're just in a bad state, then I say go further into that, express it, cry, scream. I kickbox, that helps me release stuff, and let your emotions flow like running water, and then you can reset yourself, right? So we can heal ourselves. And, I did therapy, and that was helpful for me in terms of healing a lot, because I had no attachment. In SRA, they break that right from birth. And so that relationship with a therapist was really instrumental for building myself back up. But healing can take so many forms. It can be going out into nature. It can be watching your thoughts. It can be all the things I just mentioned. But bottom line, if we constantly work on ourselves, and it's a lifelong journey, but just have that intent in our heads, like, I want to heal, because who we are is who we are. It's like we've been covered with all this muck and stuff, and the healing is just peeling off the trauma and these false layers, and then boom, the shining version of us that we really are is there underneath all that. And if we do that, like I said, that's what the global cult does not want us to do. Because when we step into our power, here's a news flash for everyone: we are way more powerful than them. And they know it, and I know it, and we know it. So if we all do and people say they're overwhelmed, they're like, the world is such a bad place, what do I do? Do you. Do you, because when you step into your power, when we all do that, it's game over for these people. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much for that. That's so empowering. I'm like, man, I want to go kick some ass right now. Doug, go ahead. It's your turn.
Okay, well, I had a couple of points. One was I struggled healing because as I healed, it meant I had to acknowledge what I'd been through. And because what I'd been through was so horrific, that made it difficult to heal because, you know, the more I healed, the more I had to acknowledge how bad it was. And then I healed some more. And so there was these layers of grief associated with the healing that in some ways was holding me back a bit till I could understand what was going on. Because, you know, I was fearing the grief. I was, you know, to admit to myself what I'd been through totally was too much because it was overwhelming. And so I had to do it quite slowly. And the other thing is, when we're programmed, a lot of the alters in our personality system that are fractured are made to look like demons or made to look like our perpetrators. Like a number of my parts were modeled on my parents because they are my main perpetrators. So that way I had to get to a point where I had to have enough conversation going internally with those parts, because normally what we do is we'll have child parts who are then controlled by trauma parts or perpetrator parts who are then also controlled by higher parts who threaten the perpetrators, and that tends to keep everyone in line. So the child part is kept in the child state. As you heal and you grow out of that child state, part of that process is going to the perpetrator parts and dealing with them, not in a horrible way. And this is where we've got to be careful sometimes with exorcisms and stuff like that, because a lot of damage can be done. You've got to identify whether someone is actually got a demon possessing them. And like Rachel, my father would double in size when he'd become possessed. You could see, you know, a total transformation of him that wasn't very nice. But if you try and exercise a part of your personality system, for example, that can create more damage. So how I deal with perpetrator parts is to love them. So you've got to go to those parts of yourself and deeply love them and understand why they're doing what they're doing. Often they're not doing what they're doing because they want to. It's because they were traumatized into doing that and they're still too scared not to do that. So what I would do is get my child parts to sit there when I'd got to a point which was this was possible, and I'd get the perpetrator parts that were dressed like my mother and father. Already I would have sat down with them and talked everything through with them. Normally we don't like being disassociated. It's not a fun thing because we're all fragmented in all these isolated bits and pieces, and that's not a joy of living. That's a very separate way. And so I would find the commonality with my parts would be, do you enjoy being a perpetrator? Typically the answer would be no. And so then with that part, I'd say, okay, well, if we give you a new job description, what can we do? And so I'd start the conversation, start building the trust with those parts of me. At the same time, I'm working with the parts above them, saying, look, you know, we don't want you to keep threatening this part. And it becomes this inner dialogue, but progressively with love and loving your own parts and giving them new job descriptions and allowing them to do the things that they want, but also becoming inclusive and bringing them into all the other parts so that they're part of a loving family instead of a disruptive family becomes quite good. And this is something when I go to work, I'll say to my internal system, I say, right, I've got to work. We'll get the front person to work, but while we're working, can you guys at the back keep continuing this loving process and keep working with each other and sharing and things like that. And for me, that's really powerful because one, that stops me having negative thoughts, because the negative thoughts might come through one of these persecutor parts. As Max also said, we have programming to self-harm once we speak, and that's another part of us that's programmed to do that. So then I have to go to that part and work with that, and this does take time. For all of us, we like to sleep a lot, we need to rest a lot, because it takes time to live after what we've been through. So I hope that sort of gives some more in-depth understanding of the internal system.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Doug. That was a great description. And Rachel, what do you have to add to this?
Well, in relation to healing, I just wanted to say that I had some memories throughout my whole life. I didn't get to squash those, but my body remembered the really horrific memories and started to bring them through before the actual intense, ritualistic memories and the really horrific stuff came up. And it's interesting because that came up hand in hand with the psychic abilities re-emerging. And for a while, big part of my healing was actually coming to the understanding that I came into this lifetime on a soul level, knowing my parents, knowing that it was going to be difficult for a purpose. Because during the time that my body was in agony, and at times I struggled to walk at one point, I wanted everybody to know what I'd been through, and my body showed it. I was just this tragic victim. As soon as I recognized that I came in on a soul level, as a powerful soul coming in to have this experience because there was some purpose to it, the pain started to go away. So I'm not saying that it's not okay to be in pain, and I'm not saying that everybody has to, decide that they came into their life to experience the things that they did so that they could have a higher purpose. But if you can get out of that victim mode, that's where the resilience comes in. It's so incredibly powerful. It wasn't that I just immediately forgave my father, who was my perpetrator, my main perpetrator. It was that I got to the realization that for whatever reason, he played a part and I played a part. And I'm doing now the work that I think is really, really important. That's why I came in here in the first place. And part of that is the psychic work, because again, my psychic abilities came back in as part of the memory process because a lot of the abuse involved psychic ability, communing with these demons for these sick, cowardly adults who couldn't do it themselves. So as far as the gifts go, you don't have to lose them. Like Max said, you don't have to give them up just because you're going through a healing process. I've had some survivors say similar things to me about, you've got to give that up because that's part of a program. I was always innately psychic. It was just that it was abused. I don't use any of the abilities in an evil or wrong or unethical way, the way that I was taught to use them. Now, as an adult, I completely switch that around. That's really powerful, being able to switch that around and help humanity. That's a massive part of the healing.
I love that. And it's important, going back to just taking our power back. And yes, I think that's a big part too, why people in this community are so against it, because all that they hear for the most part are the ways that it was exploited in these stories, right? When this wasn't something that somebody just, implanted in you whenever you were 8, this was something you guys were born with. So whether or not you would have went through trauma, obviously that can, you were trained over and over and over again to use these abilities. So it was something that became a skill, but regardless, you had them, whether or not they put you through MK Ultra or satanic ritual abuse. So again, you would have had these anyways to use in a fashion that you would have given consent to. It's just you were forced to do what other people wanted, like Rachel said. And I think that's really important to delineate between that for people. Did either Doug, Max, did you guys have anything to add after listening to anybody?
Yeah, my psychic abilities, I see a part of who I am. It's not part of the cult. And, I think as we discussed before, they will target a lot of children to hope to get at least some who have got the abilities. And if you don't have the abilities, normally you're killed. So because if you can't disassociate, then you're too much of a risk for them. So, excuse me. But none of my abilities diminished. I find them very helpful now because there's what keeps me strong, if I can put it that way, against my abusers. often I'll know when they're going to try something, or they know when they're going to do something. I can hold them to account a lot better, if I can put it that way. But it's something that was, I know that was, well, maybe it was amplified, because I think when we go through what we go through, it's like training for anything. You get better and better and better at it. And they would push us again and again and again to see what our limits were and whether we would survive. Most of the testing done on us was to push us to absolute limits. Like when electrocution, for example, you'd get buzzed again and again and again and again and again. For me, it was till I couldn't stop throwing up. I think I wrecked their experiment, but it was just, if I didn't have, or if the three of us didn't have the resilience we have, we wouldn't be here today. So yeah, we're using it for good. We're not going to do their dirty deeds.
And I agree. It's abilities that they identify what we might be good at and then work on that. But see, you can turn that around. I was raised in many different countries. I grew up trilingual. I've always had healing abilities. I became, a psychologist because of that. But guess what? I'm using those abilities against the global cult. I have helped many, many people recover from trauma. And, I use my voice now on my show, Unbroken. So, you can take those gifts, reclaim them, and use them for good.
Amen. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Reclaim them. Use them for good, everybody. I wanted to open it up now to talk about the central heterochromia. I know that that's a big topic. Figured this part could be more of a group discussion if anybody wanted to sort of start. I know all of you have talked about this before to some capacity or heard each other talk about it. But I'd love to open up the floor for this discussion. It's very fascinating how a physical feature that a certain percentage of the population has could indicate, something like a psychic ability. And I'd love for you guys to maybe talk about sort of the history of that, like why that is, what is central heterochromia in a sense, and how, it pertains to your stories.
I think, Doug, given that was your research, maybe you should start that one.
Start, Doug.
Okay. Well, I started researching. How many years ago is it, Rachel? Wasn't that long? 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, I reckon it must have been a couple of years at least.
Yeah. So when my started changing colour and things like that, and I started looking into it, and I'm still researching, I'm finding it's still, there's areas that are inconclusive, but what we're noticing, and I had dinner with another survivor, it was about a week ago. She has central heterochromia as well. Oh. So, so it seems to be general populations, 1% or 1%. Is how rare it is. So it's one of the rarest eye conditions. It can be because of trauma, but that seems to be very little. It does have a high prevalence in the Scottish ancestry, but then it has a very high prevalence with celebrities and with survivors of ritual abuse. So the avenue that interests me is because we're dissociative, is this being expressed in our eyes? Are we getting two different colours or multiple colours in our eyes because that's an expression of disassociation? I've also had a lot of people who are psychic, their eyes change colour when they do their psychic work, which was really interesting. So I don't know if that happens with you, Rach, but...
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And I know my eye colours do change quite rapidly. Or when I say rapidly, they can be more green one day, more blue, more hazel sort of things. I've noticed in my family, my daughter has blue eyes, same with my brother, and they can either be brilliant blue or they can go grey blue, or they, all those sorts of things. So I do notice with people around me, eye colour does change. When we've looked into the research, Hitler was fascinated with it. And trying to change people's eyes colour. So talking to the other day, and they said they were injected as a child to change their eye colour as well. So there's this fascination about it, and so it's just continual research to try and understand what's really, really going on. Another thing that I read was that people with heterochromia have 2 sets of DNA, one in the blood and one in the flesh. I still haven't been able to confirm that. So it's just where, it's something that's come up. It's something that's very, yeah, prevalent amongst us, and it's something we're still coming to terms with. Yeah. So that one there you can see is blue on the outside, and you got more of the gold in the inside. But that's a fascinating topic. What do you think, Rach?
Yeah, this is one of the things that just absolutely fascinated me when Doug started asking me about it. So I've got 5 different colors in my iris. The Hindus believed that people who had central or full heterochromia, so central's where you've got the circle of different color around the pupil to the rest of the iris. Full heterochromia is when you've got 2 different colored eyes. So one's green, one's blue, one's brown, one's blue, that sort of thing. You've got segmented heterochromia as well, where just one partial. So you can actually see an example of that in that top row, top third to the left has got a segmented part of the iris is a different color. Yep, well done. And there's one in the middle just below it too. And there's I think they call it partial as well, where you've got maybe a whole third of the iris is a different color to the rest of the iris, so it's like a pie shape. So the Hindus believed, and this is also again Doug's studies, that people with these eye conditions were able to commune with God. They could see the future. They had these psychic abilities. They could connect with otherworldly entities. So I think that it's that plain. It's as plain as the eyes on our face. These people who study psychic ability can see going around. They might go to childcare centres. They, this is what drives me crazy about, the governments particularly in Australia. So they don't necessarily have close-up photographs of children's faces, but we've got something in South Australia where I am, where they've got cameras, like they're photographing the children throughout the day and uploading that to the computers and sending that out to all of the family members, who can then just share that QR code to anybody. They could put it on the dark web if they're a sick member of, of that family. And then that children's information's out there. So if it's a close enough photograph, they'll see the central heterochromia. They'll know where that child goes to school, when they're at school on that day. They'll know exactly where they're at school, which class they're in, whether or not they're smart, not so smart, easy to target. It just drives me crazy. So, there's these databases being produced of people. And so again, this is a fascinating topic, but please don't share photographs of your iris around on the internet, because it's an identifier. And if you've seen the movie Minority Report, again, that's a projection that they're doing. They want to be able to do iris scans of people. This is why, because then they've got this database and they can see who's got these abilities and who hasn't, or who has the potential for them. And I don't think that just people with central heterochromia or full heterochromia have these abilities, but I think that this is one very clear and easy sight. Sort of, you can see it. It's that clear. So it's almost like running around with a barcode on your forehead. Look at me. I can do things, and then they know that if they dissociate that person enough, it does seem really quite fascinating, Doug, what you also produced about the connection between Rh negative blood and the central heterochromia. There does seem to be a connection there. And again, these satanic bloodlines have that Rh negative blood. So it's fascinating that it's a Celtic thing. Because obviously, Doug and I were actually cousins. We didn't realise that until Doug's research again discovered, I shared the family history with him, and he managed to find a correlation, because my maiden name is also McIntyre. So, and we've both got it. The number of people in my family who have it is astounding. And again, Doug's rare because it's 1/3 of that 1% of 1% I think you shared with me is male. The majority of people with central heterochromia are female. Yeah.
Yes, that's fascinating. What do you think, Max?
You, Doug, turned me on to the whole thing. I didn't even know that existed. And so you had me going and looking at my own eyes. And my eyes are blue, but they change color. They go from baby blue to a navy blue, sometimes a bit of a green or purple. So all my life, people have commented, your eyes change color. Like, what's up with that? I never thought much of it. And when I looked closely, around the iris, it's a golden, it looks like a sun, like there's little, I don't know, it's like like a sun when you draw it with the little rays that come out. So that's there. So I guess I have it. I hadn't, I don't know much about it, but I do know that the eyes are the windows to the soul. So when we're in physical form, we're going to reflect our soul lineage. So the Satanists are very bloodlines, but I think what's more important is our soul family and our soul. Like, that is obviously what does everyone say, that the eyes are the windows to the soul. So I think this heterochromia might be revealing the soul lineage of people who come here and who are possibly a threat to the global cult.
Wow. This topic it's so fascinating because even, I went back and, even on my Substack article, I put like a bunch of celebrities that had it. And I was like, that's so interesting because I recall looking at specific people and being like, what is it about their eyes that they're so pretty? They're almost like they draw you in, and you don't realize it's because they have multiple colors necessarily. For some reason, they sort of are attractive in a way, or kind of stand out or look different, or just have this like brilliance to them almost, and it wasn't until Rachel brought it to my attention, and, Doug chimed in and was sharing some of his research, that I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many in Hollywood. You just put it in Google and list and list and list. I mean, you'll find lists of like 50 celebrities that have heterochromia of some kind, 60 celebrities, 25 celebrities. There's just all these different articles written about it, and so many of them do. And then again, going from the survivor perspective, that I got an overflowing amount of people who were like, oh my gosh, me too. Oh my gosh, me too. I have that, or my mom has it, and it is really fascinating. And I think it does beg the question, if there's just this very small percentage of people that have it, and we know a lot of, and I would almost beg to say all celebrities that make it sort of big time are also products of these systems. So, we can divide survivors in Hollywood, but I mean, when it comes down to it, I think there's a lot of similarities in the childhood of what happened to everybody. And so asking, what does this demographic have in common? Is it trauma? Is it dissociation? Is it going through things that the normal person wouldn't, and it somehow impacts our eyes? I mean, it impacts your body in a lot of ways that are, probably supernatural in a way, and things that you guys have experienced, whether it's, the physical body pains of getting memories that other people may have never experienced in their life. There's so many ways that our bodies abreact to trauma, and our eyes, I think, are something that begs the question of, does this have something to do with it? Did either of you two, Rachel or Doug, have anything else to add?
Yeah. The other thing that's very interesting in relation to trauma, and I listen to a lot of podcasts on near-death experiences, because it's just an area of fascination and life experience. And they say when we die, we either go to the light, to the dark, or a combination of the light and dark. And so people who have those experiences, it normally amplifies their IQ. So it can double or triple your IQ. So that's another thing that they're starting to do research on, is when they die, they go to the other side and come back. There's normally a significant, not always, but I think if I got my facts right, 60 to 80%. I can dig up the research and send it through if you want, but it has a massive impact on people's IQ, and it can amplify it incredibly. So, we have that impact. Yeah, we just become very good at survival, I think, staying alive, because it's something that we're trained in. Well, we're not trained to stay alive, but that survival instinct in it's because it's tested so often as a child. And the other thing is, when you go through trauma as a child, it can take you at least 2 decades to deal with it. Whereas when you go through trauma as an adult, it's normally about 5 to 7 years. So I think we're starting to understand trauma a lot more. I was listening to Gabo Mate recently, and he said people who are very, very kind and can't say no, usually as a result of trauma, end up with autoimmune disorders, because the psyche won't say no because they've been trained not to, but the body does, because the body says, no, we've got to create a boundary, and that boundary will often be a sickness. So it's a fascinating area. I think as we delve into it, we could learn a lot from it.
Yeah, also I think just trying to think of the guy's name. Doug also pointed out to me that these celebrities that have central heterochromia or full heterochromia are often in these Marvel movies, which is describing and expounding on the fact that humans have these incredible abilities, but they're latent. So the guy who keeps playing Superman, can't think of his surname, Kale or something, he's got segmented heterochromia, and you know, Robert Downey Jr. has done many of the different Marvel characters. I mean, you look into, you know, Scarlett Johansson played an individual called Lucy in one movie as well, but that was about drugs. But it's also about this enhanced ability, enhanced intelligence. Yeah, just off the scales. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pre-programming. What are they setting us up for? You know, they tell us everything in advance. You know, I watched Aquaman the other night at IMAX because we're in Sydney, and it was interesting. Anytime they became possessed with the spirit, they got heterochromia.
Huh. Yeah, it's full on. Yeah, there you go. There's Mila Kunis. She's got it. Kate Bosworth. Yeah, it's unbelievable how many of them have it.
Incredible.
So
And it also it kind of explains, sorry, a lot of these people, I'm not saying it about, I'm not being libelous about any of these particular actors or actresses, but some of them really don't have any great gift. And you think, how did this person get into this position? And it's nepotism, it's cronyism, and it's, there he is. I couldn't think of his name before, Henry Cavill. He played Superman. You know, how is this possible? It's not about ability with a lot of these people. There's also the factor that having this condition means that they are dissociative, as Doug has pointed out. What do you need for somebody who's going to play a role, pretend to be something that they're not, and do it convincingly? You need them to be dissociative. So
and why
how many of these people are actually bringing a demonic entity into their body that's then playing a role? I mean, we see so much about people like Beyonce. I don't even know if she's got central heterochromia, but that's an example of someone who allows in this entity that she describes openly as Sasha Fierce. That's not her. She can't do it without Sasha. If that's not demonic possession, I don't know what is. Sorry, Doug.
No, that's all right. I was just going to pick up on a point you were saying, Rach. You know, I mean, we worship actors, you know, as though they're the celebrities, the leaders of the world. They're the storytellers. They're playing make-believe, and yet we have a culture now that worships them. You know, why aren't we, what about all the people who are doing brilliant things in the world, saving lives and things like that? Why are they just discarded? We're a group of people, you know, we watch awards every year for these uber wealthy people who are just really, you know, some of them are good at role playing. You know, it's sort of, doesn't make sense.
I know that sounds really rude and rough, but they're lying. they're convincing liars because they're playing a role. And I'm not having a go at acting and actressing. It's just, why are we revering people who are pretending to be something that they are not? And that is the example, perfect example of the psychopath. They are pretending always to be something that they are not, to convince all of us that they're okay when they absolutely are not.
It's social engineering. That's what Hollywood is for, and all other varieties of it. We, like Doug said earlier, the brain cannot distinguish between an actual thing in front of you or what's playing on a screen, or even what's in your own imagination. The nervous system reacts. So apart from all the subliminal stuff and the frequency involved in TV programming, and they call it programming, you know, so they're telling you, it's showing a certain lifestyle. Like in every show I've ever watched, people drink copious amounts of alcohol. They throw back shots. I mean, you'd be dead if you threw back half the shots that some of these actors do. You know, it's like you're watching that going, no, that's not even possible. But so they're trying to normalize and glorify alcohol, because alcohol rips holes in your aura, entities can come through, and you're dumbed down, you're more easily manipulated. They will show certain, like, you know, that is a true statistic. There's, I don't know, by the time a child is 18, how many murders and rapes and dismemberment they have seen on television. Even something innocuous like Grey's Anatomy, which everyone loves to watch, I watch TV and I analyze it, you know. It's like they're showing an open body, they're showing blood and guts. That's satanic, right? They're trying to and on sitcoms over the decades from the 40s to today, the age that children date or are interested in dating has gone less and less and less. So you have like 10-year-olds being all sassy and wearing crop tops and, you know, talking about the book. In real life, they're trying to groom children towards pedophilia, you know, so etc. I mean, I could talk an hour about the different social engineering, but that's what that's for. We watch it and we are herd animals. We take a child, and any those of us who have children, what do children do? They copy everything. They copy what you do all the time. That's how they learn. They mimic. So they put stuff on the screen and they know that we're going to absorb it and we're going to mimic it. All the fads that happen, they're on TV or on media of some kind. The incidence, for example, of children who identified as transgender was extremely low until that's pumped out, pumped out, pumped out. And now the number has increased exponentially. It's not natural. So that's what it's for, exactly what it's for. It's to engineer us into whatever thing they want us to go into. Yeah.
Great answers, you guys. I hope that gives people a few things to ponder about, you know, things that we're used to seeing all the time and maybe don't ever question. We have about, I would say about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll start wrapping up and you guys can tell people where to contact you. But I wanted to sort of open it up and talk about a couple other topics that I think are really interesting that I got requests from to talk about, which was ley lines and auras. So sort of the energetic side of what you guys can see and experience that other people can't. And maybe if you guys want to talk a little bit about what those things are. I know auras too can tell you almost about like the health and vitality, somebody's mood, you know, even things that people can do to improve their aura, you know. So I'd love to open it up and have you guys talk about a couple of these things. The ley lines are obviously a geographical energy type thing. Rachel knows a lot more about that than I do. I'm probably getting the lingo all wrong, but wanted to just open it up to you guys to talk about these couple of things just because they do come up and I think it's like a natural fascination that people have.
Yeah, I've already minds if I start. Yeah. So I've been fascinated with ley lines for about the last 10 years, purely because I'm an avid photographer. And I'd go out and take hundreds, if not thousands, of photographs in one day and then take them home and take lots of, you know, check them out and see if I could see anything interesting in there. And by interesting, I'd say, you know, it's not just the birds and animals that I was photographing in the trees and, you know, the beautiful nature that I was picking up on flowers and things. I would also find in the photographs that there would be these pareidolia images. So pareidolia is, according to psychology, and not to denigrate psychology, you know, obviously there's beautiful people in psychology like Max, but there's also those that would just take all the magic out of the world and relegate everything to some sort of, you know, scientific, you know, non-magical factor, but a non-spiritual factor. But pareidolia is where supposedly the mind correlates things that have no real correlation to being like humans. So you might see a face in a tree, or you might see a face in a rock, or in your linoleum there might be faces, or knots in a cupboard of a walnut, you know, veneer cupboard might have little knots in it that look like faces or animals or whatever. So when I'd be taking the photographs, I'd be looking for those sorts of things as well, because I see those things out in nature quite a bit. Sometimes I'll see them while I'm taking the photograph, and sometimes I won't see them until I get home and look at the photographs. During the process of taking all of these photographs, I would notice that there would be these perfect circles in nature in some of these photos. Sometimes I wouldn't notice it unless I was away from the computer, the picture was up on the screen, and I would notice there'd be this perfect circle somehow in nature, which is rare, within the photographs. And then I recognized that these tended to turn up in specific areas. So I'd go out there and take a whole series of photographs in the area and came to the conclusion that I was actually photographing ley lines. Because ley lines are a specific frequency, the frequency bends light, so that even if there's no tree behind or plants behind or within the ley line space, which belies it, because trees and plants try to avoid to grow in them. So you might see a tree and it might have a limb that's all bent around in a perfect circle, and you think, how on earth does that happen? Or arcs around in a perfect way. And then you might notice that the plants behind it are doing the same thing. And then you notice a corridor. And if you allow yourself to go into relaxed vision, where you're not looking clearly, but you're allowing your eyes to go out of focus, you can see it much more clearly. Walter Kilner, who's the father of Kirlian photography, has stated that when you use relaxed vision, you can pick up different aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum that you cannot pick up with focused vision. And he's the father of Kirlian photography, which is the photography of the aura. So again, you can get a leaf, cut half of it off, take a Kirlian photograph of that leaf, and the part of the leaf that has been cut off will appear as the aura. It's still there, even though that part of the leaf has been removed. So it's evidence of the aura, evidence of the soul, or the energy of that particular living thing, even when it's not there. So what I found with these ley lines is that plants and trees avoid growing within them. If they do grow within them, they become very misshapen. They try to avoid this perfectly cylindrical tunnel through nature. It's most obvious in natural areas because you can see it. Also, within those spaces, which I finally worked out were fifth dimensional energies. So it's the representation of the fifth dimension within the third dimensional plane. And within the fifth dimensional plane, these tunnels, you get doorways to other dimensions as well. So higher and lower dimensions. So these are the corridors that souls go through to get to the dimensions that they belong in, that their soul frequency allows them the key to the doorway of when we pass over and when we come in as well. This is our entrance and exit to the third dimension to be on Earth. So what I'm teaching now is how people can identify them, go out to them. And what I'm trying to teach people is basically the Satanists have been using these ley lines, and where they cross over, they create portal spaces, large vortexes and portals. That's where a lot of these things like, you know, the Vatican, which Max speaks about, you know, she's been involved in rituals there. They basically, the Satanists will do horrific things in those spaces to try and program those energy lines, which I believe are the Earth's soul to a certain degree. It's what keeps the Earth alive. Without this, we would have a barren planet. They do that to program the energy on Earth for misery, death, torture, murder. They're basically, you know, when you look at names like BlackRock, that's an intention. That's an intention that they're trying to create. So it's extremely important, this information. People need to know where to find these. Otherwise, you have to learn how to dowse, and that's, you know, complicated. You can actually go out into nature, find these beautiful lays, go and meditate within them, use energetic protection before you go in, because you can get attachments, because again, there's dark dimensions that allow entities in through these spaces, as well as light dimensions that are connected to them. And I'm trying to convince people to go out and sing into the lays and into the portal spaces. Take in positive frequencies, play a guitar, but play in major chords, don't play in minor chords, because minor chords are depressing. And just to lift with intent to lift the Earth's frequency, to bring her into a higher, happier frequency, and to undo the damage that's been done for so long. Oh, you're muted, sweetheart.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Thank you, Rachel. I've seen you post about ley lines a little bit, but I'm very new to that too. So that is very fascinating. Sort of the soul of the earth. That's a beautiful way to put that. And does anybody want to talk about auras a little bit and explain maybe what those are and how, I guess, how do you see them and what do they do and what do they mean?
I think Rachel should take that one too, but I just want to say a thing about the ley lines. You know, these people that part of the global cult, they, you know, in terms of their hierarchy in the pyramid, right below the tippy top, which are not human, are the coven. So they know black magic. They know astrology. They use these energetic lines on the planet, and they've craftily built the Vatican on a certain one, you know, Stonehenge, Washington, D.C. is structured similarly to the Vatican, with the circles and, you know, and the monument. So that's a whole nother layer of their control that's kind of abstract, because most people don't know anything about it, but they have absolutely utilized these energetic lines and for the dark, but they can be utilized for the light. And to my knowledge, Earth has been kind of a nexus planet. Like, there have been portals to the higher dimensions and portals to the lower astral dimensions. And so with the rituals they do, they want to open the portals for the lower astral dimensions, you know, the hellish beings, to come in and be part of this reality. And there have been portals that are fully light. And so with those, they've tried to shut them down. So to my understanding, there's been some light ones. You might say they're like a portal to the heavenly realms in the Middle East, which is why there's always war in the Middle East. They're always bombing that area. So it's just, I don't know as much as Rachel, but what I do know is that they are utilizing these energetic sources for evil. So it's important to know about it. And Rachel has spoken about it several times. She had a brilliant presentation at my summit about that. So, you know, I would highly recommend people find Rachel and listen to that presentation, or take one of her classes, because I think it's worth learning that. And in terms of auras, I've learned the little bit I know from Rachel, so I'm just going to defer to her here.
Thanks, Max. I forgot to mention too, there's an incredible book called The Long Straight Road, or The Old Straight Road, by a guy called Alfred Watkins. And in the very beginning of that, the pagans, the Romans in the UK, used to dedicate their ritual spaces to the spirit of the forest. And I mentioned before these pareidotic images that I would see in these photographs. When I was photographing the ley lines, I would find, before I even realized I was photographing ley lines, I would see that there were these faces in nature, in the trees, in the plants, humanoid faces. I recognize now, because of the readings that I've done and the information that's come through, and Watkins has this dedication information in his book, these entities are fairy entities. They're fifth dimensional entities. They are the custodians of the leys. They want us to know that they are there so that we can use them for light, because they don't want the earth to die. They don't want the Satanists to have this energy take over and to control the leys for these bad things. So that's something that I show in my course, some of these entities that I've actually photographed in these spaces. I mean, it's incredible. And with regards to auras, I know Doug has a lot of information on auras too, because he sees them as well. Everybody has a soul. The soul that doesn't, well, basically your soul is your aura, and it operates the body like a puppet through the soul chakras and the meridians. And so again, the ley lines are the meridians, and the portal spaces, the chakras, are her chakra spaces. So the soul frequency that we have has a hue and a resonance and a vibration. Different hues indicate certain vocational abilities. So if you have a white aura, then you're most likely a healer. You usually can become an Akashic adept. You can pick up information without even having to think about it. It just comes through the pineal gland, as long as the pineal is healthy. If you're a blue sort of throat chakra colored soul, if that's, a lot of the soul colors relate to the chakras of influence. So someone with a throat chakra colored soul would be someone who's an orator, a vocalist, often an academic. Someone whose resonance is orange would be very sexually driven, very money driven, very selfish. Red auric presentation can be very fine. It's very difficult to pick up, but that'd be your psychopaths. So, you know, it goes in different levels above the crown. So if you've got a violet aura, you're usually a psychic. You pick up on a lot of things, you're precognitive. So each aura frequency denotes certain characteristics or personality traits, vocational abilities. So that's something else to take into consideration. Just to go back to the chakras of the earth as well. So I believe the Vatican is a chakra spot that they're manipulating. There's also Uluru in Australia, which is in the centre of Australia. That is supposed to be the sacral chakra of Australia. It just happens to be a big, bright orange rock, reddish orange rock. And it's the sacred site for the original people here. That is a crossing of two dragon lines. Dragon lines are the biggest of the ley lines around the world. There's not very many of them. Three appeared, there were three pairs up until 2012, and then another one appeared in 2017, one appeared in 2018, and one appeared in 2019 while we're going through this incredible awakening period. So that is highly significant. So the leys are becoming more powerful and growing in exponentially at the same time that humanity is getting to a higher level. And I also wanted to point out too, in a gentleman called Rory Duff did a book on energy vortexes and ley lines, and I thoroughly suggest people read that one as well. as Alfred Watkins. And he talks about that there's scarcely a 1 kilometre, square kilometre of Earth that doesn't have a ley line in it. You know, they are everywhere. They are literally everywhere. He has a table where he shows all the different varieties, from dragon lines down to the very, very fine smaller ones. He paces them out. He's a dowser, so he even shows you how big they are as far as the energy frequency, how far they radiate out. But the ones that I see are typically, the ones I see mostly and photograph are mostly are about 2 meters across, so they're reasonably small. With Uluru too, there's a famous case in my country which allegedly involves Marina Abramovic, who is the spirit cooker. A lot of people would know about her because she does some pretty strange stuff. It's supposed to be performance art. It's really horrific and scary. And again, it's a kind of programming to see blood and you know, what appears to be human sacrifices and eating humans and just trying to make it normalized. She's allegedly involved with a sacrifice of a child, a baby, at Uluru. She went missing. Her mother was convicted for it, then exonerated because it was just ridiculous. She didn't do it. And that child's name was Azaria. Azaria means protected by God. So that whole process in that chakra space was to flip the bird at God. You know, that's what these people do. They find this amusing. It's entertaining for them. It doesn't matter who they take, who they abuse. I also heard that Azaria also means sacrifice. So I don't know if that's actually correct, but I did look it up and see that it means protected by God. So yeah, I mean, that's alleged.
Wow. I was gonna see, I want Max, if you needed to go right now, totally up to you. If you want to stay on for just a couple minutes, I wanted to give Doug a minute maybe just to talk about auras, but I wanted to check in with you. If you have to go, I'd love for you to be able to share where people can find you and all of that. That way you can get to your appointment if you need to. So just want to check in with you.
I have about 5 more minutes, so it's
Okay.
you know, yeah.
Okay. Doug, do you wanna spend a couple minutes and just talk about auras quick and then we'll wrap up?
Okay. Well, the thing that just comes to mind for me is energy. So, you know, with me, with auras and ley lines and everything, what I do is when I cross town lines, you know, where the line between one town and another town, I sit there and I see if I can feel the energy shift. And so I think that's a good thing for people to do, is to see if you can feel energy shift when you move from one jurisdiction to another. And in the same way, then you start to, it's just exploring with energy, because we're all made of energy. Everything that's solid is really just space and energy. But I think if we start to tune into energy, it makes these things a lot easier, because then you can start to feel the ley lines. And also it's like with chakras, it's learning. And I think Rachel's the class I've done with hers, you know, you sort of blur your eyes, you soften your focus, and that way you can start to see the silhouette that forms around people on that soft focus. It's like if you stare at something and look away, that's still imprinted on your eyes. I don't know if other people get that. I get that a lot, but it's just learning to tap into what's around us. We have all these instincts, you know. Animals know when earthquakes are going to come. You know, we should as well, but we become so much more complacent because we live in a society of convenience that we keep losing all these skills that at one stage used to be very, very valuable to us.
Great insight. It is really fascinating. Again, just exploring the things that we've forgotten that we can do, you know, and I
Yeah.
really appreciate all of you coming on and helping remind us who we are, helping bring us back to how we can use these things for good, and that people should be scared of what the evil is doing with these gifts, but that we shouldn't look at them as negative in people that are using them for good and people that were born with these gifts that they've cultivated. So I appreciate you guys normalizing this conversation and talking about this with me. And I'd love to go around for you guys to share where people can find you, keep up with you, connect with you. And I'll start with Max. And then we'll wrap up for today.
Thanks, Emma. People can find my website at unbroken.global. I do interview truth warriors, SRA survivors, Doug and Rachel are on there, and teachers and healers. I recently did a summit, and both Rachel and Doug spoke there, and other amazing people. That the recordings for that are on sale on the website for a reduced fee. You can become a member on my website, and we have Zooms twice a month. The first one's coming up on January 10th. And some of the people that have spoken at the summit and others will be attending those Zooms. So if you want to, I want to create a global community, you know, where we can talk and sort of, you know, brainstorm how to both heal ourselves, and we need to create something new as the dark structures are falling. They're dying. The beast is dying, and that's why it's lashing out like crazy. So when one thing comes down, something else needs to be there to take its place. So let's bring all our brilliance together and brainstorm what we can do to change all the different structures in the world. So that's where you can find me at unbroken.global. And thank you so much for having me here today.
Absolutely, Max. Doug, where can people find you? Are you online?
No, they can't find me at the moment.
I'm elusive. I'm not online.
No, I used to be. I've got to get the presence up and running. So that's something for this year. As I said, Max has said I'm on her channel and also on Rachel. So I am endeavoring to get up there. Hopefully this will be a big year. I've got some books planned. I've got some helping out with some courses, and also to do some you know, discussion groups on how to research your past and things like that. So there's quite a few things I've got that I want to do this year to help survivors. So yeah, I will get a point of contact up there. I had to pull back for a while because of death threats and things like that. So that's where I needed a break from that, you know, but yeah, I'll get back on there.
Wonderful.
And thank you, Emma. Yeah.
You're welcome. Such an honor to have you on. And we'll definitely plug your links whenever you get there. We'll bring you back on and you can promote all of it, and we'll get everybody to follow you there. What about you?
Okay.
Where can people connect with you?
Well, on BitChute, Rumble, Telegram, and YouTube with just my name. And I also have a website, www.6science.com. Thank you, Emma, again.
You're welcome. It's an honor to have all of you here. I appreciate you guys so much. And for people listening, I'm going to have all of their links below. Please go connect. You know, this is information that's never going to be featured on the news. And if we want people to wake up from what they've been asleep to, it's really up to us. You know, we are the ones that have to take initiative and share this information, learn it, you know, and sort of defy the old system and build a new one, just like what Max was saying. You know, we need to create the world that we know we can, a better world than what we have, a better world for our children, you know, and all of these amazing individuals have incredible resources for you, hours and hours and hours of their time that they've donated for free, and things that you can pay for to learn additional if you want extra exclusive time with them to learn specific things. So I'm going to have all of their links below. I'll have all my social media links below, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.